I can start anytime.
I'm waiting for you to start.
We crossed the border into the States about 10 days ago, and we've slowly been moving down Lake Michigan. And I don't think either one of us knew what to expect when we got here, but it's really impressed us. It is beautiful here up in northern Michigan. And we find ourselves today in Charlevoix, and behind us is one of the harbors in Charlevoix, which is where we're keeping our boat on what's called
No, it's called Round Lake.
Oh, it's called Round Lake, not Circle Lake.
But close.
And it's just off of Lake Michigan, and it's beautiful here.
Very picturesque.
Yeah. So I think Sandra wants to talk about numbers.
So we wanted to share what it's cost us on our first month of looping. So this would be for July. We are towards the end of August right now, but we've just pulled together our numbers. So the first one that we're going to share with all of you are our groceries costs. A lot of loopers do not share this because they figure, well, you have to buy groceries when you're at home anyway, so it's really not an extra cost to looping. But what we have found, and I'm sure other loopers can agree, that when you get to a port or a harbor, it's often in a small town and you need to go get fruit or vegetables or whatever, and the cost of groceries is quite a bit higher in these small areas. Granted, sometimes they're shipping it in from a long distance, they have a captive audience, whatever, I'm not judging, but it is definitely a factor in grocery costs. So in July we spent, I'm just gonna wait till the motorcycle goes by. In July we spent $1,300.65, and that's Canadian, so Americans you'll have to do the conversion. I think the dollar is like around 137. So that was a very high month for us regardless of how we live for the two of us, but we provisioned at the very beginning of the month before we left Midland. Like, we provisioned very well. We had lots of dry goods, and then when we stopped in Parry Sound for a week, when we had to go back to Toronto and do stuff, we provisioned again. And so what we think is our August numbers so far are pretty low, a couple $100 American maybe that we've spent so far. Not entirely sure about that, but it really doesn't feel like we've spent as much on groceries this month. So that's number one. Number two, meals out. I'm just going to check my numbers here. We spent about $482 on eating out for the month of July, and that's somewhat on par with our usual expenditures. One of the big I'm going to wait till the big truck goes by. Most of that $483 is about $200 that we spent taking our kids, the ones that are still in Toronto, and their partners out to dinner when we went back to Toronto at the end of July. So, and we were going through Georgian Bay and anchoring a lot, and there aren't a lot of restaurants out in the wilderness there. So we didn't really spend all that much on the loop on meals out.
Our next category is dock fees, and in July we spent just under $600 on dock fees. And thinking back, we spent it was 16 or 17 days at anchor, and the balance of that was either docked or at Parks Canada docks, which are not very expensive at all. So that we thought that was really quite good. I don't think August is going to be as good.
No, we've already been docking a lot coming down Lake Michigan. There aren't as many opportunities to anchor. There's some, and we're hopefully going to do a bit more of that.
Get some anchoring in.
So anyway, dock fees I thought were pretty good for July. The next category is kind of a catch-all category of other. It was just a whole slew of things, and we spent just under, again, about $583 on that. And these are things that we don't really fit into any other category, like little hardware-y stuff, batteries, maybe stuff for the kitchen that just doesn't go anywhere else. So, you know, if anyone wanted a breakdown of what that was, I could break it down further, but it's really just tiny stuff all over the place. So, some of it was freight, like we had some stuff shipped to us in Parry Sound, so that's what it is. I'll let Chris talk about boat upgrades and safety.
Yeah. So the next category was boat upgrades and what Sandra calls safety. And we spent a fair bit of money. The big ticket items were we switched our anchor to our anchor rode to be all chain, and we got 200 feet of chain, and that cost us about $1,200 in Barrie, Ontario. We thought that was a fairly good price, but we went and picked it up ourselves. to get that price.
Yeah, we just happened to have a rental. The rental company, we were headed to Toronto. They ran out of cars. They offered us a pickup truck, and we were like, yeah. So we went and picked it up ourselves because it was about, what, 300 pounds?
It was 300
300 pounds. So
And-
that would just kind of lucked out not having to rent a truck to do that.
And the next big item was we upgraded one of our VHF radios to digital, and also it has an AIS receiver in it. So that set us back, I can't remember how much that was.
I think that was about 500 or 600.
Yeah, it wasn't cheap, but having the AIS, and now I've integrated it on the NEMA 2000 network, it's quite nice. And then there were some other items in there.
The binoculars.
Oh, binoculars, yeah.
We had our little hiking binoculars that we've had for 30 some odd years, and they worked, but once we got, I think they're 7 by 30 or whatever the marine standard is, it's just like, whoa. And we decided not to get stabilizing binoculars. We've used some before, Tracy and Daryl. If you haven't followed us before, we stayed with some loopers in Georgia over the winter who became very good friends. We're out on their boat, they had stabilizing binoculars, fabulous, but $1,600 wasn't in the cards. I think we spent $200 or $300 on these, and they've been great. Coming into a harbor, if you want to see something, these have just been wonderful. So that was a good buy.
And there were a number of other smaller items in there, that just shackles and a swivel for
the new
chain
anchor
was
chain.
fairly expensive.
Yeah.
Almost anything that's marine seems to be fairly
And
expensive.
we'll keep buying items to upgrade boat stuff. We're talking about another VHF radio up in the upper helm to kind of attach to the one on the lower helm.
Well, it'll just be a handset that attaches to them.
We're always looking at adding more safety features. Anyway, that's a big one. It will probably continue to be a constant expenditure, maybe not quite as high as it was this month. Boat comforts.
Go ahead.
So boat comforts are things that we probably didn't absolutely need, but that we've been eyeing for a while. And one of them was the Magma stainless steel pot set. We've been using some pots that came from Toronto from our apartment there, and it was okay, but we were always short pots. But you know, we have limited space, but the Magma nesting set is fabulous. It's got all sorts of pots and pans. They nest, they have handles. Anyway, it's been a game changer as far as storage space and being able to cook more things at the same time. We got rid of a lot of salad bowls and things like that because you can use these stainless steel pots and they look very nice. So it was a real minimizing of what we had, and anyway, it was a good purchase for us. It's increased our enjoyment of cooking. I think the other item in there was the amplifier. There's an old sound system on the boat, very old, and Chris got an amplifier, and I think you're either done with that project or very close.
Yeah, I don't know if it was worth it, but it's done.
But if we replace the speakers, it might be worth it. You know, I suspect we could get some pretty inexpensive speakers that are better than the ones you've got.
Yeah.
Anyway, there'll always be things that we'll get that will increase our comfort and enjoyment of the boat. Next one is fuel for the dinghy. Our outboard obviously is gas right now. Chris would love it to be electric, but we spent about $60 on that in July, and we did a lot of dinghying around.
Yeah, we used the dinghy a lot when we were closer to Beausoleil, and also in Georgian Bay. And there were a couple of days where we were ferrying people back and forth, and we went through a fair bit of fuel. Since then, we haven't really used very much.
No, we use it more when we're anchoring, I think, but we haven't really used much.
We haven't bought any fuel in August.
In a while.
Is that a true statement?
I'm not sure, but we'll see next month.
Yeah.
We have a listing for YouTube. We're close to making our first couple of dollars on YouTube, but right now we're not. But
we're really far away if you consider what we've spent on gear.
Well, YouTube, 1,300, 1,100 of that was the drone. Sorry, I just got a notification. 1,100 of that was the drone, and it was something that we had been eyeing for quite some time, and it went on sale, and we thought it would really add to our videos, which I think it has, and it's just fun.
That's a very liberal we. Sandra's been eyeing that drone for a long time.
and to be open and honest, Chris is the one who's using it because I'm terrified of losing it in the water. But we've been having fun with it. Chris has been setting it up to follow me around, which is a little bit creepy but kind of interesting. And so on Georgian Bay it was great. We kind of fooled around with it a bit, and had a good time that way. But the last one was fuel, or no, not the last one, but getting to the last bit of the list here was diesel for the boat. And we left, you should probably talk about this because you're more in tune with what the levels are.
So the numbers are we didn't put any fuel in the boat in July, and
we started at
about 80% full. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we did put some fuel in June. So I'll back up. Coming up last year, so coming up the Trent Severn, and we came across Lake Ontario and we started in Lake Erie. We figure less than half a tank of fuel.
But we also started, the boat came with full fuel.
Oh yeah,
fuel.
It was
so we had a full
tank
tanks
of fuel
last year.
So, and then in the spring, I spent some time filling the tanks. So we were about 80% full when we left.
July 1st.
And really, because of this video, I've been looking at it all. I don't think we've even used a full tank of fuel yet. I think we might have used about 3/4 of a tank. It's hard to say because we put 50 gallons in yesterday just to be safe. Just to put it, but the tanks were over 50%. And yeah, like I said, we haven't used that much. And from what I can run on the numbers, we are running about 3 to 4 nautical miles per gallon, which is pretty good.
Which is good because if you talk to other loopers or if they share what their fuel costs are, it's nowhere near that.
Yeah, and so I think 3 is very conservative. 4 would be pushing it. So I'm pretty confident we're between 3 and 4 gallons per nautical mile.
Yeah, and it's indicative of the engine we have. It's a single diesel engine. And the boat. We don't go faster than 6 knots. Otherwise, we're just wasting fuel.
We don't go fast, but we do go slow.
Yes. What does that mean? Did I just say that? Is that why you're repeating it?
I said it.
Oh. Anyway, we tell people, like, sometimes you kind of go from place to place with the same group of people for a while until your plans change. But nobody has to get up early to beat us to the next stop.
Yeah, and again, this is a really big aside. We have been playing around with how fast we can go, and we've had the boat up to over 8.5 knots. So we know we could go faster. We typically travel around 6 knots. So we may start playing with that to try and get a handle on how much fuel we burn when we start pushing up there.
But this thing isn't a race for us.
No.
Like, we have no timeline for this other than to not get stuck in the ice.
But there have been a few occasions, particularly on Lake Michigan, where, if we had known we could have gotten off the water, 6 hours on the water, could have only been 4 hours or whatever.
We probably would have gone faster.
It might be worth going faster.
So we need to play around with that because we know in an emergency or if we really need to boot it that we can add maybe 25% more speed. But in terms of fuel, July, we didn't spend anything. There'll be some in August. We've already put some in this month that was about $220, and I suspect before the end of the month we'll probably fill the tanks because what we'd like to do is fill them and then start really monitoring it.
We have more than enough fuel now to get
to Chicago.
Beyond Chicago, definitely.
Yeah, but I do want to actually fill them, and then we can start paying attention to what it drops down to and how much we put in the next time, and that way we'll have a really good handle on cost per nautical mile.
Just so you don't think we're idiots, the issue is that the tanks follow the hull of the boat. So there's more fuel in the upper level of the tanks than there is in the lower level, and we just haven't got a handle on how much we're going through.
Okay.
Anyway.
So last 2 items, laundry. We spent $60 in July. And laundry facilities, we don't have anything on the boat. So depending on where you are, a washing machine can cost anywhere from, what we've discovered here in Charlevoix is $1.50 a load to anywhere to $4 or more. So it's a really hit and miss proposition. On days where it hasn't been super sunny, we've really dried the clothes well because there's nothing worse than being in kind of a wet environment than having wet clothes. They just never dry. So we have spent more than I've liked on laundry, and we're thinking about getting a small unit for the boat because if you multiply 60 a month by 12 months, that's $720. Did that right? 12
I wasn't paying attention.
I should have better math because I work with numbers all day. And $720, you could buy a unit and in 2 years it's justifying itself. But we're not sure yet where that's going to go. Right now, right now we're just making do. It's working, but it is a cost that we were a little surprised by because it is more than we thought it would be.
Yeah, it seems it's painful to pay $4 for a load of laundry.
Yeah, I mean, I can't remember where it was, but for one load of laundry to wash and dry it was $20 because the dryers didn't really do a good job. We wanted it to be really dry and whatever. Anyway, and then the last item is tipping, and about $40. I started tipping in Canada just because tipping at marinas is a bigger thing in the States, I think, than it is in Canada. I think part of that, and maybe it's just that I'm very sheltered, but I think part of that is in Canada we have a minimum wage, so young people typically get paid, at least $15 an hour in Canada, no matter where you go, and depending on the province, a little higher than that. So some people tip, some people don't, whatever. Here in the States, I think the culture is different anyway, but also in service industry jobs, depending on which state you're in, and I've Googled this a little bit and researched it, those minimum wage for like restaurant workers and marina workers and all those kind of things can be anywhere between $2 and $5 an hour, which is really like not good. They're assuming that those people can make the money up in tips and make a good living at it. So I've made it a practice to tip. I'm not a big tipper. Some people say, we tip $10 for someone to grab our lines, anyone who touches the lines. So I tip $5, and that seems to be a standard.
I think tipping somebody to clean out your septic tank
is
I have no problem with that.
No problem with that.
The rest of this, I don't know. This is a bit like tipping at the at fast food or whatever. I'm not sure what other people do, and I'd be curious to hear.
Well,
anyway.
for me, knowing that it's usually young people, and we've raised some young people, and knowing that there's no real minimum wage that's a decent minimum wage for those industries, I tend to just tip. And it's awkward for me sometimes because it's a new thing to tip for this particular thing. But hey, we're pretty privileged to be able to do this. We're not wealthy people by any stretch, but we can afford to do this trip. And I just figure for these young people who are doing it with a smile on their face, that it's worth it to me to give them a bit. So our list, once you add that all up, is $7,681. And if we take out the $2,700 for the boat upgrades, which we're doing but aren't really month-to-month expenses, and we take out our YouTube investment, $1,300, $2,700, that's $4,000. Then we're down to $3,681. So I have no idea if that's typical for loopers. I'd sure like to hear from other people who track their expenses. I have no idea if this is going to be the average for the year. So we'll see next month whether that changes or not. A couple things to note. We've mentioned this before. In July, days at docking, 14. Days anchored, 17. Mostly in Georgian Bay, all in Georgian Bay. Nautical miles traveled, 135. Very slow, but we intended July to be slow because we wanted to practice anchoring, and there was no hurry to get to Chicago because of the lock closures until October 1st, so we wanted to take our time in July. I think on the engine, the engine ran for 22 hours in July, just getting from one anchorage to the other, mostly. And I think that was it. Can you think of anything else? Some stats in July?
No,
I can't think of anything else. So our plans now, we're headed off tomorrow to our next stop, probably Leland, and we'll just keep letting you know what we're doing. Anyway, that's it for our July expenses. We'll do the same thing for the August expenses sometime in September. Hopefully we'll actually be in Chicago by then and doing a bit more work on the boat by the time we release those numbers, and we'll have had some good adventures between now and then before we release the next numbers. So hope everyone's having a good week, and we are hopefully dropping another video this coming weekend, so hope you tune in then.
Bye.
Bye, the motorcycles are going by, so it's a good time to end. Bye, see you next time.